Good day. My name is Lakshya Behl. Welcome to Behl's Business Broadcast. Today, we are going to continue discussing the macro events of the week, the major news that you need to stay abreast of. And this broadcast is, as usual, for people who want to scale their business from where it is today to the next level. And the next level, well, you get to decide that, whether that's 10x, 50x, 100x, or 1000x. So let's get started with the macro news for today. And I have a few things that I would like to share with you. As usual, let's start talking about AI because that's the big thing that's happening right now. I remember seeing this short clip of Kevin O'Leary of Shark Tank being interviewed, and someone asked him what it is that he would invest in right now. Or maybe it was Robert Herjavec, the other Shark Tank guy. And he says AI is the big thing right now. He would be investing in AI. He would invest in companies that work with AI, so on and so forth. And the bottom line is that AI is here to stay. And today's news confirms it. Tech giants are now exploring the idea or possibility of space data centers as AI demands surge. So that's compute and energy. And people are thinking about taking it to the space. Now, whether this happens or not, whether what Sundar Pichai is saying actually transpires or not is irrelevant. What is relevant is that AI is here to stay. AI is going to continue to grow. And every time we have a stream, we talk about several pieces of information that confirm this idea that AI is going to continue growing its impact and growing as a thing that dominates the landscape of business right now and how everything is done. AI is to 2025 what .com was to 1990s and what the gold rush was to California centuries ago. And what we are seeing now is a new gold rush, and you should be ready to capitalize on that. And how you do that, we're going to cover that through the rest of the stream. Let's keep going. So again, this is another piece of news that tells you that AI is going to continue its onslaught. Google limits free Gemini 3 access after launch sparks demand surge. I mean, there's been a lot of demand for AI is all that you need to know. The demand for AI is surging, whether it's for generating images or memes or videos or clips or just talking to people. In fact, there's been some reports about lots of users, millions of users now using ChatGPT and other chat models as their consultants and their counselors and even their psychoanalysts or therapists. That's going on right now. So AI's use is going to continue to rise and its demand is continuing to surge. And this is just an impact of that. What this again means for you is that you're not using AI in your business means you are building the opposite of a moat. Let me remind you what the moat example is. So Warren Buffett once said, if you don't have a moat around your business, which is basically a barrier for just someone else to be able to get into your business or in your line of business, then your business is essentially very insecure, very vulnerable. Well, right now, if you're not using AI, you're doing the opposite of that. You are building the opposite of a moat, and your competitors are already using AI, even if you're not. Let's keep going. Tech industries, tech giants are now cutting 180,000 jobs. They've already cut 180,000 jobs as AI is literally taking over jobs, whether it's art, coding, creative work, writing work. All of it is being done by AI, and AI continues to get better despite the poison pill which AI itself is. It hallucinates a lot and it gets trained on its own hallucinations in future iterations. Despite all of that, the amount of compute that is being dedicated, the amount of resources that is being dedicated to AI continue to rise. So this is not going to stop. This is not something that goes away. You can't just bury your head in the sand and expect it to go away. It's just not going to happen. If you have a job, if you have a secure job, if you have something of a job that you think you're irreplaceable about, well, we recently covered in one of our live streams how AI is now producing music that over 90% of people cannot tell whether it was generated by a real creative artist, a human being, or by AI. It's getting that good. And I would say it's still in its infancy. It's only getting started. It's pre-revenue in most cases, or negative profits in most cases. Most of these AI companies are losing money right now, and yet their valuations continue to soar. And that is why, AI is in its infancy, kind of like Amazon was when it wasn't making money. Amazon for years lost money, wasn't making any profits. They were making revenues, they weren't making profits. AI is in a similar boat right now. And even despite of that, it has been responsible for hundreds of thousands of people losing their jobs because AI just does it cheaper, better, reliably on wall time. It's sort of like a one-time investment. If you set up a cluster of AI machines, you pay basically as much as the annual salary for a senior dev, and you can replace an entire team on wall time, on electricity time. So AI, if you're aligned with it, then you are positioned well. If you're not aligned for taking advantage of AI in your business, in your personal life, you're not positioned well. That's all there is to it. And despite all the negative news about people having less income, losing jobs, having higher expenses, groceries becoming more expensive, gas, insurance, maintenance, all of it becoming more expensive, everything is going on despite all of that. High expenses, high inflation, low credit availability, high unemployment. And despite all of that, people have spent $11.8 billion on Black Friday, and this is just the online sales. This is an all-time high. And you know what this proves? This proves your customers are actually going out and spending money right now. If they're not spending it with you, they're spending it with someone else. That goes all around. We are all small, medium business owners, large business owners. And for all of us, if the customers are not spending money with you, then they're spending it with your competition, with someone else. Isn't that obvious? Because they are spending the money, clearly more money than they've ever spent before. And so today we'll talk about how to capture more of the market share of your total addressable market, TAM, and how you can do that in your business without hustling. I don't like the energy of hustling, the hustle culture of let's keep going, let's work 12 hours a day, 14 hours a day. I don't even think that's productive or gives you better results. You can have better results in a very short amount of time and for a very small amount of effort if you position your things correctly, if you position your business correctly, and if you deploy your efforts strategically, which is what we're going to talk about today in the remainder of the stream. And lastly, before we move on to the strategies, talking about the macro environment, President Trump has now proposed eliminating income tax with tariff revenues. Well, mathematics aside, which is kind of impossible, this brings us back to the core tenet that we keep talking about on this channel, that the political solution is always money printing in one way or another. Okay, now how are they going to cover the deficits if this ever comes to pass, which I don't think it will ever happen. I'm not a betting man, but if I were, actually I am a betting man, and I am going to bet that this is not going to happen. Okay, I would bet a reasonable amount of money that income tax elimination is just not going to happen. Maybe for a certain percentage, maybe they'll shift the windows and say, oh, we have millions of people who now don't need to pay any income taxes. But at the end of the day, governments will continue to collect income taxes, especially if you look at the revenue gaps, right? Tariffs have now they've collected $195 billion in custom duties for this year. That's more than 250% from last year, which was $77 billion. However, that is dramatically short of $2,200 billion or $2.2 trillion the government collects annually through individual income taxes. So the deficit is just insane. Tariffs could generate around 2.8 trillion through 2034, but that would need to cover not only the income tax elimination, but also offset economic drag from the tariffs themselves. So the idea that everyone is not going to be able to, or everyone is not going to need to pay income taxes is preposterous because it just doesn't make sense. And there are political reasons why this can never happen, but it has become a talking point, which brings us back to the point about quantitative tightening and quantitative easing. And I keep telling you, and I keep saying in all my streams, that eventually government does quantitative easing. Like, we've had a prolonged season of quantitative tightening. Despite of that, here's the other thing. AI and SPX have continued to make all-time highs. NVIDIA achieved a $5 trillion market cap last month. all of that happened despite quantitative tightening. And now we are heading into the season of quantitative easing, which is the ultimate political solution when people have lower disposable incomes and people love to spend. People are very happy when they have the ability to spend money. We've just seen that with the Black Friday report. Despite having a credit crunch right now, interest rates are super high. People are losing jobs, and despite all of that, they've spent so much money in one day on online shopping alone just because it was Black Friday. So people love to spend money, and if people have disposable income to spend money, they are satisfied. And when people don't have disposable income, and when people feel the crunch, both cash and credit, that is when you have political unrest, which is why Trump has insisted repeatedly over the last month that inflation is now under control and everything is cheaper, despite that being an absolute lie. Why? Because inflation is a one-way street. We've never had negative inflation, not in the recent past. We've never had deflation. So even if inflation crawls down to 0%, what that means is that the prices are not going up anymore. That does not mean that the prices have come down. In order for prices to come down, you would need negative inflation, which we haven't had. Even if inflation is low, the prices that have already gone up don't go back down. They just don't continue to rise quite as steeply. That's all that means. In other words, with money printing or with inflation, cat is out of the bag and it cannot be put back in. So that brings us to the end of this section. And next, we are going to talk about the principle of disproportionation, or 80-20. And a lot of people think that they understand 80-20, but I don't think that's true. Well, first of all, let's understand what the Pareto principle is. It's the implementation of power law. And most things in the world follow power law. People think about normal distribution, and people think normal distribution is, well, actually normal, right? People think normal distribution is actually normal. It's not. Normal distribution is a misnomer. Here's what normal distribution looks like, okay? So for any event or outcome, you're going to see this bell curve. Forgive my handwriting and drawing. It's terrible. I know that. But it's the bell curve corresponding to normal distribution. This is your mean, median, average mode, right? Let's not get into the mathematics of it. We'll get that some other time. What I'm saying right now is that normal distribution is actually abnormal. It's not seen in nature. It's not seen in business in particular. Normal distribution does not exist in very many cases. Now, people like to quote airlines. You cannot jam more people onto a flight. Yes, that's correct. Or people like to quote restaurants. You cannot have more diners within a restaurant, within a dining room simultaneously, concurrently. That's true. But that doesn't follow normal distribution because you're looking at the wrong variables. So look at the largest restaurant chains. You have McDonald's, you have Burger King's, you have Arby's. Their exponential growth, their power law growth did not come from jamming more people or pushing more people into one location. It came from growing exponentially, using their profits and using their leverage or using their deals or using their connections, some sort of an exponential factor to grow the number of outlets they have. A lot of people think that power law does not apply to their business, and I'm going to tell you right now, it absolutely does in more ways than one. And what does the power law mean, really? It really means disproportionate rewards. That the position that you have right now somehow fuels better records for you or rewards for you. And people like to think about three different categories. I saw this video by Veritasium where he was talking about three different categories. You have normal, then you have log normal distribution, and then you have power law. And log normal, it sounds like it's agnostic. So let's take SPX, right? It sounds like SPX is agnostic, whether you have $100 million in your portfolio, or you have $2 million in your portfolio, or $20,000 in your portfolio, you're going to have the exact same returns. Sounds about right, right? The amount of capital you have, the amount of portfolio value that you have in SPX, or the amount of SPX that you own is not going to change the returns that you receive on the SPX. That's true. What's going to change is your withdrawals. If you have $100 million, right, and your portfolio does, let's say, $11 million, you might only withdraw $1 million. Why? Because that takes care of all your needs after taxes. Whereas someone else who has $200,000 in their portfolio, they also made 11%, but that was just $22,000. They had to withdraw 50% of that, and that still did not cover their entire expenses. They still had to keep a job and go out and do things to make money to survive. So the next year, the capital, the starting capital for someone who started with $100 million the previous year is now significantly larger. They have $110 million, right? So the $100 million guy withdraws $1 million and has $110 million. The 200K guy withdraws $10,000 and now only has $212,000. So they only had a 6% increment in their starting capital, whereas someone with a larger capital has a 10% increment in their starting capital. This is how log normal, if you understand what log normal is, becomes exponential power law. In fact, everything proceeds according to power law. So the 80-20 principle or the Pareto principle is not about eliminating 80% of the work. That's just a very simplistic understanding of how 80-20 works. I want to explain to you how 80-20 truly works. So let's do that now. 80-20 means 80% of the results of any kind, positive or negative, right, come from 20% of the inputs. We should say outputs, right? 80% of the output comes from 20% of the inputs. But this can be compounded, right? It's not just 80-20. I kept saying that over the previous streams, but today I think I should go into the detail and try to explain this to you. So what that means is you can square both sides. What that means is you have 64% of the output from 4% of the input. Now, how does this actually manifest in the real world? Well, 60% of your complaints or 64% of your complaints, now the numbers are rough. They're just to demonstrate approximations. They're not obviously always going to be 80-20, like fragmented along the 80-20 line. It could be 90-10, it could be 70-30. The principle that we're looking at is the principle of disproportionate outputs with respect to inputs. So 64% of the complaints come from 4% of the customers. 64% of the profits also come from 4% of the customers. There are two different implementations of this. You can fire these 4% of the customers and you would not have 64, you would just cut down 64% of your complaints just instantly. Fire the worst 4% of your customers. In fact, we'll take this further. Or you can just focus exclusively on serving these customers at the highest levels, and you would still have 64% of your profits. And this goes on for everything. This also goes on for effort. By the way, you can also cube this. So instead of doing a power of 2, you can do a power of 3. So 80% cubed, right? And 20% cubed on the other side. What that means is 51.2% corresponds to 0.8%. Less than 1% of inputs achieve more than half of outputs. Let me reframe that. Let's say you are a business owner, you're working really hard. Instead of working 8 hours a day like a normal person would do, you're really working 12 hours a day and you're burning the candle 7 days a week. That's a lot of entrepreneurs. That was me. That has been me for a very long time. 12, 13, 14 hours a day. Consistently. Burning myself out for years. Are you doing that? We'll do the math on that, okay? So 12 hours a day multiplied by 7 days multiplied by 50 weeks. Let's say you take 2 weeks off. You have that kind of reasonability. We still have about 4,000 hours into your business per year. Here's what we are saying. Less than 1% of those 4,000 hours, in other words, 40 hours, correspond to over half your profits. So if you're making $10 million a year or $1 million a year, whatever you're making, right? More than half of that came from just 40 hours throughout the year. Everything else, even if you had to do it, you could find someone else to do it for you. You didn't have to do it. In fact, you're very hard pressed to find someone who can consistently spend 1 hour a day on their business every single day, just building equity, doing the one thing that matters, the one debottlenecking activity that really matters. We're going to talk about that. Today, we are actually going to talk more about customers and how customers are distributed right here. We're going to talk about that. Customers are distributed along the 80-20 curve. But we're talking about effort, right? Think about the 10,000 hour philosophy of mastery. People talk about how 10,000 hours gives you mastery, or practicing something for 10,000 hours gives you mastery. Well, a lot of people are learning to play the guitar because they want to get a lover, or they want to impress their friends, or they want to impress their social gatherings, be the flavor of the party. You could spend 10,000 hours learning the guitar, or you could learn 2,000 hours, which is 20% of 10,000 hours, right? But now you're not going to be a master of guitar. You're still going to be able to play a lot of melodies. You're going to be able to master the scales. You're going to be able to master most of the chord progressions. You're going to be able to look at different kinds of scales, pentatonic scales, play different genres of music with 2,000 hours. Or you could just spend 400 hours, which is just 20% of that. And now you're looking at the common chord progressions and the major melodies. That's it. Or you could go further, do 20% of that, 80 hours, just focused on the top 3 chord progressions. The 4 chord progression, actually, the 1, 4, 5, 6 chord progression, the different variants of that, they encapsulate almost 80% of the top songs of the last 5 decades. What I'm saying is you could start practicing 1 hour a day on the guitar, be focused about what you're doing, be absolutely deliberate about your choices in terms of what you're learning, and within 3 months, in under 3 months, you'll be able to play a bunch of songs. Apply the same principles to vocals, and you'll be able to sing a bunch of songs while playing them. So in 6 months from today, 5 to 6 months from today, with just 1 hour a day, you could be playing for your girlfriend, for your potential lovers, for your friends, for your family, at social gatherings, everywhere. You'll have a repertoire of songs that you can play everywhere you go. Just 1 hour a day, under 6 months. It depends upon what you want to achieve. With businesses, a lot of people just want to achieve freedom, financial freedom, time freedom, and they end up getting stuck in the opposite of that. The hustle culture is the opposite of that. When you're hustling 12 hours a day, you can't possibly be at extreme ends of productivity for 12 hours a day. 1 or 2 hours a day is the upper limit of how productive you can be, of extreme productivity, extreme, deep, long-term equity building productivity. When you're hustling, you're really just doing menial tasks. For instance, I know this guy, a friend of mine, and he says he's building his social profile, which he is. Actually, he's been doing it very well. He's been doing it for the last 7 or 8 years, and he has thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of followers across different profiles right now. He spends 2 hours a day editing his videos, 2 to 3 hours a day. It's a 5-minute short video, like a short form video. And it's a great production value. Here's the thing though, he could hire someone at $20 an hour to do that for him. There's nothing that he's doing within that editing process that adds unique value because of him. Then he spends a couple hours posting it everywhere and responding to comments, and you see where I'm going with that. That's an even lower use of his time. Then he spends time researching the topics for the next day. He has a great work ethic, goes to the gym every day, works out every day, works every day, spends 10, 12 hours on his work every day, a couple hours on product creation, a couple hours just answering customer emails. And what I think is that he can cut down his production work to half an hour, product creation to half an hour. He's in the info product industry. And then he can also cut down his marketing time to half an hour. And that's it. Testing hypotheses with respect to ads is all he should be doing. So research can be outsourced. Script writing can be outsourced. Editing can be outsourced, or hired for. You could hire someone. He could hire someone for all these things. Setting up media campaigns could be outsourced. All he has to do is things that are bottlenecking him. All he has to eliminate is everything that is necessary, but not necessary for him to do personally. But that's just one aspect of it. That's the effort aspect of it. The other aspect of it is not based on effort. It's also based on the trouble you face, right? It's based on the trouble you face. So in a lot of cases, you have these problem customers. Half your customer support issues stem from less than 1% of your customers. The numbers might vary, but the disproportionation is what we're talking about. Half of your customer support issues are coming from a small cohort of customers who are constantly just peeved with everything you do or that you offer. And you could just eliminate that. You could just stop serving them. Like fire the worst customers, fire the worst employees, and you've eliminated 80, 90, 95% of your problems just like that. It's very difficult to make sure that you hire the best customers. It's very difficult to find the $10 million clients right off the bat. But at the same time, they're not the kind of people who actually waste your time. I've had $1 million clients, and every time I've been surprised by how easy it was for them to pay. They didn't need me to justify why I'm charging the amount of money that I'm charging. They never needed me to do that. They never made me explain to them the value proposition. They just saw it. They asked me the price, they wired over the money, signed the contract, we were in business. I actually distinctly remember this one client I was working with way back in 2017, 2018, and I created this report. I had my assistant create a report where we would show him all the results of what we had done over the first month. This was the very first month of us working with him. He comes back to me with, okay, all that's good. Let me stop you right there. Within 5 minutes into the meeting, right? He says to me, Behl, let me stop you right there. You're doing all this, and I can see you've done a lot of work. What's the point of us wasting half an hour just discussing what you've done? So I said, what do you mean? We always do a reporting, monthly reporting. That was also explained to you when we signed the contract. We'll do a once a month reporting because we don't want to do it weekly and we don't want to waste our time doing it. He says to me, why are you wasting time on it now? How much time did you waste preparing this report, and how much time are you wasting just presenting it to me, both yours and mine? And so I asked, what do you want me to do? He says, just give me the KPIs. Here are my 3 KPIs. Just give me those KPIs. All I want to do is see an upwards trend in these 2 KPIs and a downward trend in the 3rd KPI. That's all I need to see. And so I push over through the 40 slides that we had prepared to the very last slide where the KPIs are mentioned. And he goes, okay, seems reasonable. And I had actually created all these slides about why the results were suboptimal. But he's like, 3% improvement is great. If you consistently do this for us, we're going to be in business for a very long time. And then he just basically goes on to ask me, is there anything else you need to know or ask me? I said, no. Do you need to know anything else? And he says, nope. He's like, okay, so send me the KPIs next month. I don't think we need to talk. That's it. We worked with him for several years. Every month, I used to send him a report with an email. And for the first few months, we did the entire report because we had the template for that. After about 5 or 6 months, I stopped sending him the report. I just sent him the KPIs. Sometimes the trend was upwards. Sometimes the trend was negative, depending upon the KPIs. And sometimes we were just unsuccessful. And I just objectively measured the results and gave it to him. And maybe twice he came back with, why are we negative on this one today? And I explained to him, we tried something, it didn't work. And he was like, okay, try something else. That's it. 3 years later, he says, I gotta move faster than you're moving, so we are going to part ways now. And that was it. But he paid us every month on time. He was very happy with what we did for a long time. And then he shopped around for a while, and he actually took his process in-house and created a team for it. But what I learned from this gentleman was how much he valued his time and my time far more than I was valuing my own time at that point of time in my career. So let's talk about 80-20 with respect to customers now. So this is a graph. It's a very interesting graph. This is a correlation between the price, the selling price of what you sell, whatever it is that you sell, and the number of customers you have. This is the number of customers you have. So this we understand intuitively. If we charge a lot of money, the number of customers we have is fewer. And we don't charge a lot of money. If you're low on the price scale, let's say you're at $100 here or $250 here, let's say, Then you're going to have a lot of customers, say in this case, 10,000 customers, okay? Let's say you have a $1,000 product. Well, of your 10,000 customers, you're only going to get, let's say, a take rate of 20%. Let's keep 20% right now. So 2,000 customers. Then at the $4,000 level, you're going 4x on the price, right? That's the meat of your product. That's your core product, right? That's your core audience. You're probably going to have 400 customers there. Then you have the high-end products, maybe mastermind summits, retreats, bigger tickets, right? Larger tickets, let's say $16,000 here. You probably have 80 customers on that. And then you have the super high-end. We'll do a consulting thing for you. We'll do it for you. We'll build out the project for you, so on and so forth. Whatever it is that you do in your industry. And here's the problem. You probably don't have all these different levels. So let's say you had a $64,000 level. You'd probably not have a whole lot of customers. You'd probably have 16 customers here. If you had another higher tier, a $250,000 level, you'd probably have 3 customers there. And that's fine. Why? Because A, you're capturing and satisfying different tiers, okay? These are various tiers, higher tiers. Here's something to understand. For these 10,000 customers, you have a customer acquisition cost. You spend some money on whether it is ads, or you spend some money and time creating content. You spend some money and time renting real estate. And we'll talk about how commercial real estate is actually just ad space. Actually, let's talk about that right now. Let's say you have commercial real estate. Why are you paying $20,000, $25,000, $50,000 a month for the storefront? Well, you're paying for the visibility, for the traffic. Otherwise, you could have had the same amount of space in the middle of Bumblefuck and paid like 90% less, right? But you are paying top dollar for visibility. So essentially, when you're paying $50,000 a month or $20,000 a month for that storefront, you're not paying for space, you're paying for visibility. So in a way, you always pay to acquire customers. Customer acquisition is never free. When we post content like this, I'm posting content like this, you're posting something on your social media. When you have thousands of viewers, hundreds of thousands of viewers, millions of viewers, it looks like free traffic. It's not. If it's an employee who's doing this content production for you, you're paying their salary. If you're doing it yourself, you're paying your time, which is infinitely more valuable. So customer acquisition always costs you money, always costly. Advertising is expensive, sure, it's scalable. Real estate is super expensive and it's super slow to scale. And content, these are the 3 strategies you have to acquire customers today, right? Some people also talk about direct mail. Well, as far as I'm concerned, direct mail or offline marketing campaigns, billboards, all of that falls under the purview of ads, even if you're not tracking the response rate of those ads. We'll talk more about the different pathways of acquiring customers, but for now, all I'm saying is when you get these 10,000 customers, you're paying to acquire them, right? But when you make an upsell offer to these customers, you're not paying anything extra in advertising. You're not paying anything extra in rents, or you're not paying anything extra in terms of new content created. You've already paid to acquire this customer. So all these tiers, they require a little bit of touch points, a few touch points as you go along to build that relationship, but they don't require acquisition costs. What that means is when you sell a $250 product, let's say that's your selling price, and your cost of goods sold is, let's say, $100, then you're not keeping $150. You're probably also spending money on customer acquisition. Let's say you're spending $200 on customer acquisition. So the net profit on that first transaction in this case is actually a negative $50. You're losing money on the front end. In a lot of cases, very successful businesses lose money on the front end so that they can get a lot of customers through the door, so that they can scale their advertising campaigns. Their margins are minimal so that they can compete in the marketplace, get someone into the door. It's significantly easier to sell to someone who's already your customer than it is to sell to someone who's not your customer yet. Let me say that again. If you already have a customer on your list, if they've already bought something from you, they're much more likely to buy something from you yet again, as opposed to someone who's never bought anything from you. This is why you have the front-end offer. The front-end offer, and a lot of people talk about a $7 front-end offer. And here we are in my industry, we pay $6, $7, $8 per click on Google in many cases. Some of my clients are paying $15, $20 per click in the more competitive industries, mortgage, insurance. How are they supposed to make money on a $7 front-end sale? It doesn't work. The economics don't work. Because, oh, you can make the back of the paper math, right? Back of the napkin math, where you say, oh, we'll get 1,000 customers at $7 price point, and then we'll convert 20% on the $500 price point. But it doesn't work like that. 80-20 doesn't work like that. You don't know people who are able to buy a $7 product are also able to buy a $500 product. So the larger the jump, the more dubious your hypothesis. Can it work? Yes. Does it work sometimes? Yes. But this is far more reliable. I always talk about a 4x price jump. So going from $100 to $400, then from $400 to $1,600, then from $1,600 to $6,400, and so on and so forth. Why? Because there's some measure of predictability. If I'm not getting 20% of the people to ascend to the next level, or if 20% of the people are not taking my next level, then I know my offer itself is weak. It's not that the market does not support my offer, it's that my offer itself is weak. That speaks to the weakness of my offer, right? So here's how the math works out according to 80-20. When you increase the price, 4x the price, right? You get 20% take rate. Now this is very rough, but this is also consistently magical or magically consistent in my own observation across various industries. The exact math varies a little bit, but when you increase the price by 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, or you offer another product at 3, 4, 5 times the product that you are currently offering, you get a 20% take rate. I always like to do 4x jumps because it keeps the math simple. And if I'm grossly underperforming, if I do the price, if I offer something for 4x the price, let's say as an upsell, and I'm not getting a 20% take rate or even a 15% take rate, my take rate is under 10%, then I know my offer itself is weak. I need to strengthen that offer. And we've talked about how to strengthen an offer. I'll just do a quick recap of how you determine the offer's strength. The first thing is unavoidable problem, right? Unavoidable problem. Unique solution. You have a unique solution to someone's problem. Remember, customers do not want to buy your product. They want to buy a solution to their problem. But they don't believe your solution will work for them. So you need to have unquestionable proof or evidence that it will work for them. And finally, undeniable proposition. If you offer me something that solves my sleep, but you want to charge me $3 million for it, it's not gonna work. Similarly, if you want me to spend a lot of time implementing your solution, it's not gonna work even if it's very cheap. If you give me a solution for $10, but it's gonna cost me 10 hours to implement that, it's not going to work for me. That proposition doesn't work for me. So that's the basis of a great offer, right? And on top of that, you have the crackerjack or the scroll stop. Can you get the attention within the first 3 seconds of your ad, of your content, whatever it is? That's your scroll stop. So that's your offer right there. And if your offer is weak, then you're going to see poor conversion ratios. But if your offer is strong enough, you should see 20% take rate on a 4x price increase. Here's how the numbers work. So let's say you start with a $250 price point on the first level. Then on the next level, you have a $1,000 price point. On the next level, you have a $4,000 price point. On the next level, you have a $16,000 price point. On the next level, you have a $64,000 price point. And if you're absolutely crazy, you have a $256,000 price point. A lot of people have products in a certain price range. In fact, if you go to a bank, they'll ask you, what do you sell your products for typically? And if you tell them that I'm selling all the way from $250 to $250,000, they're like, are you crazy? Because very few people take advantage of the entire depth map of the 80-20 curve, the curve that I just showed you, this curve right here. Very few people are taking advantage of that. They're taking home this revenue. Maybe some of them are taking home this revenue. Maybe some of them take home this revenue, but they're leaving on the table this revenue, and the next tier up there. People who are doing the top tiers are not doing the bottom tiers. That's the problem. And you're going to see why that is a problem. So let's say you have 10,000 customers right here, okay? 10,000 customers at the 250K level, and you're gonna have 2,000 customers at the $1,000 level. And now I'm assuming all the offers that you're offering at different price points are very strong based on the offer equation right here. If you have this equation dialed in, if you have unquestionable proof, undeniable proposition, unique solution, unavoidable problem, and scroll stop or attention, which you already have their attention once they bought something from you. You already have that. So this part, which is the hardest part in advertising, it's already taken care of for you. This is why you need to have upsells and other offers, right? If all of that is dialed in, then you're going to have 20% take rate on each level. So you're going to have 400 customers here, you're going to have 80 customers here, 16 customers here, maybe 3 customers here, okay? So the gross revenues here, now let's do the multiplication here. So 2.5 million here. Okay, this is all in dollars. $2.5 million here, 2 million here, 1.6 million here. This is $1.28 million here. This is now something like, let's say $1 million. Okay, I may be wrong here, slightly over 1 million. And then you have 750K here. Here's the thing though, the margin is very different. Remember in that example where you were paying for the customer acquisition costs, you also had COGS, cost of goods sold, and you were losing money on the front end transaction. On the first transaction, you were losing money. So let's say the margin here is minus 20%. It's negative. Okay, put that in a bracket. But here, of the $1,000 you're charging, you're able to keep 40% of it for yourself. Why? You don't have any other advertising costs. You don't have any additional costs right here. You only have cost of goods sold and maybe some fixed expenses. That's it. That's all you have. In fact, in a lot of cases, you should really not even be looking at fixed expenses at all these levels unless you have those fixed expenses like rent and mortgage directly attributable to these levels, which in a lot of cases you don't. You need a lot of shelf space to move 10,000 products. You don't need as much shelf space to move 2,000 products, and you definitely don't need that much shelf space to move 18, 16 or 80, 16, 3 products, right? In fact, this product right here is probably just phone calls or meetups. This one right here, when you're charging $4,000, maybe you keep 50%. Yeah? When you're charging $16,000, maybe you keep 75% of that. When you're charging $64,000, you're probably keeping 80% of that. And when you're charging $256,000, you're keeping 90% of that. So here's how it plays out. You can see the gross or the revenues are actually going down when you charge more money on each level. But this is all additional revenue. That's the first thing to understand. And the second thing to understand is the nets are significantly higher when you charge more money. So on this level, you actually lost money, right? How much did you lose? You lost $50,000 or $500,000. Okay, 500K negative right here. On all subsequent levels, you're making money. So you make, this is your margin, right? So you make 800K here, right? Here you're making 50%, so you also make 800K right here. Here you're making 75%, so you make something like 900K here. Here you're making 800K again. And here you're keeping most of it, even if you have 10% in variable expenses, costs of goods sold, you had to travel somewhere, you had to take your time out, you had to pay someone for personalized service, whatever, right? You're keeping 90% of that anyway, so that's like 670K right there. Are you actually maximizing your entire funnel to take advantage of the highest tiers of customers that your business has already got? You already have some customers. If you have thousands of customers, you already have some who'll pay 6 figures for an actual problem that you can solve for them. Do you have products? Do you have services? Do you have offers for those people? Because if you don't have these, then you're leaving this money on the table. You didn't have to spend extra money on advertising. You're leaving this money on the table. In fact, I have to talk about this. I've thought about this quite frequently with Mr. Beast's business. Mr. Beast has a $3, $5, $10, $20 product range, right? He has an absolutely enormous audience right now. 450 million subscribers, billions upon billions of views. He's got Feastables everywhere, in every supermarket all over the world. And yet, does he have the $1,000 offer? The $10,000 offer, the $50,000 offer, the $100,000 offer, the $1 million offer? Because he would have hundreds of customers at the $1 million level as well. His audience is so vast that there might be maybe just a handful, but there'll definitely be a bunch of customers at the $1 million level. Now, what might he offer to them? That's a whole different question right there. Okay, we're gonna have to do a lot of research. If he ever came to me for consulting, we'd have to do a lot of research to figure out what he could offer those customers. But the point is, he's leaving money on the table. Taylor Swift isn't. You can watch her videos for free on YouTube or stream it for a very small amount of money on Spotify. You could watch her music, you could pay for her music, you could pay more money to get her concert tickets, you could get premium tickets, you could get really the front end rows, you could have personal meet and greets at a much higher price point. There's no end to the amount of money she'll charge. She's ascended across the entire funnel of the 80-20 disproportionation graph. She really has. And you have the ability to do that in your business as well. And that's a great application of your effort, of your time, of your energy. If you're spending time, money, energy, just creating new products to satisfy your customers, your audience. And you know who your audience is. You can always survey them. You can ask them questions. You can ask them about their pain points. In fact, they're telling you, look at your product reviews. They're telling you what they need. They're telling you what their pain points are. It's up to you to come up with new solutions, new products, and offer them, offer those products and services and offers to those people at a price that still makes sense to them. A $50,000 offer sounds like an insane offer. What if I told you you can have a Lambo for 50 grand? So if you can position your offer in a way that it's as valuable as a Lambo and you're only charging $100,000 for it or $200,000 for it, you're essentially doing everyone a favor. Anyone who can afford it, not everyone can, but anyone who can afford it, you're doing them a favor. It's always about a disbalance or an imbalance of perceived value. You think or you value the $250,000 more, and they value the $250,000 less than the products and services that they're paying the $250,000 for. What's a high level use of your time? What's a high level use of your energy? Figuring out these offers and building it. Building those offers to present to your audience. That's a high leverage use of your time. What's a low leverage use of your time? Just handling customer issues at the $250 level. Or just answering emails that your prospects are sending you. That's a very low efficiency work. And someone with $10, $20, $30, $40 per hour salary could take care of all of that for you. If someone can be paid a salary on an hourly basis, on an annual basis to take care of something for you, then you shouldn't be doing it. You should really only be thinking about scaling your business to the next level. And the easiest way to do that is to look at what you're selling right now, your catalog of products. If you have a bunch of products at, let's say, $500, and if you launch another $500 product, you are really just going wide, but essentially you're still trying to capture the same piece of the pie right here. This piece of the pie right here. This is what you're doing. It's when you scale it to the next level, to the $2,000 level, that's where you're capturing this piece of the pie. And then when you scale it to the next level, that's when you start capturing this piece of the pie. And then you scale it to the next level, that's when you start capturing this piece of the pie right here. So you want to capture more of your market, you got to penetrate it deeper by offering products that cost more. That is the implementation of 80-20 no one talks about. I don't know why, but you should be talking about that, because again, remember that 80-20 comes in handy in all sorts of places. So what I'm saying is, instead of spending 10,000 hours on mastering piano in order to, impress an audience, if that's all your goal is, you can do it for like 80 hours within 3 months, 6 months with vocals. If you want to do a concert thing, or if you want to make some money with the gigs, you can do that with 400 hours of practice. With just the chord progressions and arpeggios and broken chords and inverted chords, with just that, maybe a little bit of melody, right? For a couple years of training, 1 hour a day, you could be ready to start making money at bars, random restaurants, wherever they have these live performances. They always need someone on the guitar, on the bass, on the piano, on the drums, whatever it is that you want to do. If you want to do concerts, you still don't have to be a master. A lot of people are doing concerts, absolutely insane concerts, and 2,000 hours sounds like a lot, but that's essentially how much time a full-time employee spends at their business within a year. Now, here's the thing with that. Nobody is productive 100% of the time. Nobody is extremely efficient and effective at the same time. So 2,000 hours, let's say 2 to 3 hours a day, that's just 2 to 3 years, 3 years maybe, right? 3 years of consistent practice gets you to the concert level if you train well, if you know what you're doing, if you're deliberate about the choices you make. And that's where strategy comes in. In business, it's significantly simpler. You look at the low value tasks that you are doing and eliminate those. You look at the people who are causing all the problems and fire them, whether they're employees or customers. You look at where your best revenue is coming from and you scale that. How do you scale that? Follow this curve right here. Follow this curve. Offer products at a higher level. You'll have better margins. You won't have to spend any money on advertising. And you can always ask your customers what their problems are and solve them and build a long-term relationship with them. And that's what brings us to the next part of this section of today's video, of today's stream, where we're going to talk about the KPIs that truly matter. And I learned this from the gentleman I alluded to earlier in the stream. The 3 KPIs that he always wanted to see were customer acquisition cost. How much? How much do I need to pay to get a customer? Okay, that was the first KPI he always focused on. It was never necessarily about minimizing it. It was always about optimizing it. So can we bring it down a little bit while expanding? Can we actually spend a little bit more than we are doing right now, but expand into a new vertical, into a new audience, into a blue ocean or a red ocean? Can we do any of that? And this is power law all the way. Okay, all of these are power law applications. So the more you do it, the more in tune with you are with your audience, right? The more you understand what it is that they want, what it is that they need, and the more precisely targeted your solutions are going to be to their precise problems that they may not have articulated well, but you can do it for them. You can articulate their problems for them, and they can provide specific solutions to the specific problems they have. Who else is doing that? One of the ways to look at that is actually nichifying. So business growth in general is a very competitive space. But if I were to offer business growth for Russian dentists or Russian-speaking dentists in Switzerland, a very small cohort, right? Or German-speaking dentists in Switzerland and Germany and wherever, right? Now, nobody has specific courses for them, for that particular audience, and nobody knows their specific problems. They don't just have general business problems. They have specific problems that really only exist within their industry and really only exist within their customer base or when dealing with their customer base. When you can do that, your customer acquisition cost typically tends to go down. But then you're also limiting your total addressable market. So there's a balancing act here. What you need to know is what your customer acquisition cost is and what your break-even period is. And this is where things get really interesting. How does the power law work for you? Well, let's go back to that example we had. Let's say you're losing $50 on acquiring a customer. However, this $250, your front end, also has an upsell, which is this level right here, the $1,000 level. And people either take it right then and there or they don't. Well, now, if you look at the math, okay, on the first two offers, he's losing $500,000, but making $800,000 on a total cohort of 10,000 people. So let's do front end, quick math, right? Front end plus upsell. Losing 500,000 plus making 800,000. So the total is 300,000 right there. How much money did he spend on advert? That's 10,000 customers right there, okay? So that's for 10,000 customers. For one customer, that's $30. He's making $30 per customer while paying $200 to acquire that customer. He's spending $200 on advertising to acquire that customer, and he's making some revenue. He's spending some money on servicing those clients or customers, giving them the products and services that they paid for, and servicing them completely. And after all is said and done, he gets to keep $30. So his return on ad spend, ROAS, and we're talking about nets here, not grosses. I don't know why businesses insist on accounting with grosses. I always account with nets. Anyway, so he's making $30 on $100 spent. That's positive right there. The exponential factor right there is 1.03. And if this happens on the very first day a customer is acquired, then he can typically have a cycle every 3 days, because payments often take 2 to 3 days to arrive, right? So if you make a sale today, you're going to probably have that payment in your bank by 2 days from now. It's Saturday today, so Monday, right? Or Tuesday. So exponential factor and break-even period is 3 days. I consider break-even period to include the delay between when the money hits your merchant account and when it hits your bank account. That's when you actually have the money. So the break-even period is 3 days, and your cycle is 3 days long, which means you can have 100 cycles per year. 100. You know what that means? What that means is, let's do the quick math. If you are growing, actually it's not 1.03. I'm sorry about that. That's a mistake right there. The exponential factor is 1.3. It's not $3 made. It's $30 made. So the exponential factor is 1.3. So let's go back to the screen and do a quick math here. 1.3 is the exponential factor, and you have 120 cycles through the year. That's an insane amount of money. That's an insane amount of money, and you haven't even begun to touch the back end right yet. You're only really looking at the front end. These two offers right here, these can scale to TAM. So essentially, if your KPIs are right, if you focus on customer acquisition cost and on the break-even period, and you can get to a positive point or a positive return, positive net ROAS, return on ad spend, within a reasonable amount of time, maybe 3 days, maybe 7 days, maybe even 12 days or 15 days or even a month. If you can get that, then you have infinite scalability all the way to TAM levels. TAM is total addressable market. Very quickly. Won't even take very long. Okay, it doesn't take very long. You can get to TAM levels very quickly if your customer acquisition costs can be broken even on within a relatively small period of time. And the next key leverage that comes is from lifetime value. So let's calculate the lifetime value in that hypothetical example that we were looking at, right? Let's add up all these nets. So this is 300K, but that's day 0, right? On 10,000 customers. And remember, you don't have to start with 10,000 customers. You can start with 10 customers. The math just scales. You find better ads. Actually, most people think as you grow, you go broader in your advertising targeting. But right now, the algorithms are so good. They know your customer inside out way better than you do. They know their users inside out. All you have to do is bring them the right creatives and the right copy, which means the right content. right? If you bring in the right content, the algos are gonna find you the customers all the way to TAM levels. Okay, so let's add this up. This is 2 million, 2.8 million, let's say 3.4 million, right? So the total lifetime value in that particular example was 3.4 million roughly on 10K customers, right? So that's, how much is that? That's $340 per customer. That's what it is. That's what you're making per customer. How much are you spending to acquire that customer? You're spending $200 to acquire that customer. That was the example. So lifetime value over CAC is essentially 1.7 right here. You're making 1.7 times the money, or 170% of what you're spending on advertising. That looks like, sounds like an unbelievably magical ATM to me. If you could go to an ATM and just withdraw, like let's say you deposited $10,000 and you could just withdraw $27,000. It's not 17,000 is profit, right? You could withdraw $27,000 within a few days. Would you do it? Yeah, you would. It sounds easier in principle than it's actually going to be. But at the same time, if you follow the power law, if you look at how things play out with respect to customer acquisition costs, with respect to ascension funnels, with respect to solving more and more problems for your audience, achieving total addressable market levels is easier than you think, especially if you're targeting a sliver of the audience. So try not selling sneakers. Instead, sell sneakers to those who stand all day long and have to be well dressed. Let's say doormen. Now that's a dying breed, but that's an example right there. Nobody's solving their problem, right? Sneakers for kids. People do that. Big companies have been doing that. Now, can you do specialty sneakers for kids? I know for a fact that people who have extreme versions of pronations, right, overpronation or underpronation, they tend to not have a whole lot of options even in the sneaker world. You could start a brand for basketball shoes for overpronators, and then tennis shoes for overpronators, and then skiing boots for overpronators, and you would have an insanely large total addressable market. Now, would it be as large as Nike's total addressable market? Of course not. Of course not. But you're taking a sliver of that and completely and absolutely dominating that. Follow this playbook and you've got, may not be able to sell 50 grand sneakers, but you can sell sneakers and by the way, you don't always have to do 4x the price increase. You can also do 2x or 1.5x. So instead of going from $100 to 400, that's one way of doing it, right? To 1600, that's one way of doing it. This is correct. What is also correct is go from 100 to 125 to 150 to 200 to 300 to 400 to 600. Okay, this is also equally as valid. You won't always achieve what the 80-20 curve predicts in this case because the gaps are so small, but you'll still capitalize a huge deal of the revenue, of the capitalizable revenue within that total addressable market that you've got. And you can do that. There's no one stopping you from doing that, as long as your break-even period is short enough and you can achieve a positive return on ad spend, net return on ad spend within a few days, within a few weeks. In fact, if you're a drop shipper, if you know any drop shippers and if you know what they do something called surf scaling. And what that means is breaking even within hours. Somehow they figured out systems to break even within hours, and then within a few hours their cycle is complete, so they start advertising more because they take the profits that were generated and tack them on to their advertising budgets, which increases their advertising budgets exponentially. But you don't have to break even every single day. You can break even in a week. You've got 50 cycles every year, 52 cycles every year. That's just insane. The math on these things is just insane. I gotta show you the math on these things, okay? Even if you can do like a 10% every week, okay, 10% every week, and you can do it for a year, you're looking at 142x. 142x. You start with $1,000 advertising budget on week 1. In a year, you'll be at $142,000 advertising budget for that week. I want to make this very clear. We're not talking about scaling revenues, we're scaling advertising budgets. And this is just the front end, maybe with an upsell. That's all it is. It's just the front end with an upsell. right here. We're not talking about the deep funnel right here. So how do you apply 80-20 to your business, to your mind? Well, you are not supposed to work 20 hours a week or 80 hours a week or 60 hours a week. You really can't even work for 20 hours a week, to be honest with you. 20 hours a week is actually pushing it. That's 3 hours a day consistently. That's a lot of burnout. What are you even doing that's so strategic that requires 20 hours a week? Business is not that complicated, because most of the business process is about serving customers, which you shouldn't be doing yourself, or about testing hypotheses, which algorithms should be doing for you. So what is it that you're really even doing? How are you even spending those 20 hours a week? If you're spending a whole lot of time in your business, you're probably doing busy work. We talked about that in my previous stream. If you're doing busy work, you're wasting your time, really. You're not doing anything strategic. You're not building equity. You're not doing the things that actually matter. The one thing that you should be doing is growing your business, debottlenecking your current problem, debottlenecking your current obstacle. That's the way. Ryan Holiday, I keep talking about Ryan Holiday. No sponsorship, but he should probably sponsor me. Ryan Holiday wrote this book called The Obstacle is the Way, and that really is all there is to it. All that you need to know. The obstacle is what you need to be working on right now. So that brings us to the end of the stream. My name is Lakshya Behl. This is Behl's Business Broadcast. And as usual, we've talked about how macros are shaping up, how AI is actually going to obliterate every economy, every conceived model of growth that we've had so far. It's just inevitable at this point of time. Can this change? Yes. Is it likely to? No. It's going to happen sooner or later, and it's going to kill a whole lot of jobs. Lots of people are going to lose their jobs over this, and there's nothing anyone can do about it. It just is going to happen. And finally, we talked about how to use 80-20 to scale your business. You can use 80-20 compounded to just fire like 1%, the bottom 1% of your employees, and get rid of half your problems instantly. Or fire 1% of your worst, most complaining, most, I would say, permanently annoyed customers, and just take care of half your problems overnight. You don't lose a whole lot by firing the bottom 1%. You gain a whole lot. And then just focusing on the top 1%. How do you do that? By offering more and more expensive products and services that make sense to your audience. If you can do that, you've built yourself a money machine. And finally, the KPIs that you should be working on, because these KPIs are really important. Customer acquisition cost. How much are you spending on acquiring each customer? Break-even period. How much time does it take to break even on every single customer that you get, right? If you spend, let's say, $200 to acquire a customer, well, how long will it be before they spend enough money with your business so that you have enough gross profit to cover the $200 and make a little bit of profit, which is what creates an exponential factor. You take that profit and you tack it on to your advertising budget in the subsequent cycle, and the cycle is as long as it takes for them to break even, right? And that is how you get exponential growth. You can achieve TAM levels very quickly within a few years in your market if you get this dialed down. And finally, if you want to really supercharge it, just add some rocket fuel to it, build out a backend. And that is what you should be doing with your time. My name is Lakshya Behl. I had great fun talking to you today about things that truly matter with respect to exponential growth, 80-20, and how to apply it to your principle, how to use the power law to grow your business from wherever it is that you're stuck to the next level that you want to go to. I'll see you in the next stream, and we'll talk more about avenues